I am Liora Jameson, 28 years old, from New York City. The day I realized my husband didn't see me as his wife, but as his servant, began like every other day. Quietly, efficiently, invisibly. I was standing in the kitchen of our Manhattan apartment, wearing an apron over my work clothes, the scent of burnt toast hanging in the air, sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the marble countertops with soft gold. Jack sat at the dining table, scrolling on his phone, coffee cup half empty, suit jacket draped over the chair beside him. "Did you call the cleaner?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the screen. "I did," I said, setting his second cup of coffee down gently. "She'll come at noon." He nodded absently, then frowned. "You didn't iron this shirt properly. Look at the sleeves." My heart sank. "I'll fix it right now." He didn't thank me. He never did. I stood there for a moment, watching him scroll through messages and emails like I wasn't even there. I could see my reflection faintly in the glass cabinet behind him, the tired smile I'd learned to wear, the way my shoulders curved inward as if I was apologizing for taking up space. That was my role in his life. Quiet, useful, replaceable. When I first met Jack, he was everything I thought I wanted. Charismatic, confident, a lawyer with an easy laugh and a way of making everyone feel small in his shadow. I mistook that dominance for strength. I called it security. He called it love. But love, I learned, doesn't make you feel like you're auditioning for approval. That morning, as I rushed around preparing his lunch, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled faintly, and slid it face down. My stomach tightened. That small, sharp instinct women develop when the air shifts for no reason. Who was that? I asked casually. "Work," he said quickly, too quickly. "Don't start." I bit my lip and nodded. But the lie lingered in the air between us like perfume that wouldn't fade. He finished his breakfast and stood, adjusting his tie in the mirror by the door. "You'll handle the dry cleaning today?" "Yes." "And the credit card bill?" "It's due this afternoon. I already paid it." He smiled. Not kindly, but in that condescending way that said, "Good girl." Then he kissed me on the forehead, the kind of kiss you'd give a loyal pet, and left without another word. The door clicked shut. I just stood there, still holding his empty coffee cup. It hit me then. The crushing awareness that I had built my life around a man who saw me as background noise. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wilted roses in the vase, the same ones I'd bought myself 2 weeks ago. Jack didn't remember anniversaries anymore. He didn't remember much about me, really. Not my favorite song, not my favorite food. But he remembered to remind me of my failures, every forgotten detail, every imperfection. It wasn't always like this. When we got married 3 years ago, I was full of hope. My friends envied me. "He's so put together," they'd said. "You're lucky." I was lucky, or so I thought. But after the honeymoon, the compliments turned to criticisms. The warmth turned to calculation. "Liora, you used to be so ambitious," he'd say, flipping through my old art portfolio with a frown. "Now you just waste time painting." He said it like it was a hobby, not the thing that had once kept me alive. I stopped painting after that. The clock ticked loudly that morning, each sound drilling into my chest. I walked into our bedroom, spotless, staged, lifeless, and opened the drawer where I used to keep my sketchbooks. They were gone. I froze. I searched the closet, the dresser, under the bed. Nothing. Then I found them, stacked neatly in a garbage bag near the door. He had thrown them out. All of them. My hands trembled as I pulled one free, its edges bent and smudged from years of use. The cover had my name written in faded ink, Liora's Dreams. My throat closed. I sank to the floor, sketchbook in my lap, staring at the small note taped to the top of the trash bag in Jack's handwriting. "We need less clutter around here." Clutter, that's what my art was to him. What I was. I don't remember crying, just sitting there numb until my phone buzzed. A text from Jack. Don't forget to pick up my suit. Dinner with clients tonight. 7 sharp. No, thank you. No, I love you. Just another command. Something inside me, something that had been suffocating under obedience, cracked. I stood up, staring around the room that didn't look like mine anymore. The pristine white sheets, the empty nightstands, the air that smelled like nothing. It felt like a museum exhibit of a perfect marriage. Only the glass had finally shattered. That night, when Jack came home, he didn't notice my silence. He walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped his keys on the counter. Did you book the car for tomorrow? I did, I said evenly. Good. He poured himself a drink and sank into the couch, scrolling on his phone again. I stood behind him, watching the glow of the screen reflect in his eyes. I saw her name this time, Melissa. The co-worker he swore was just a friend. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. Jack, I said softly. When was the last time you asked me how I was? He looked up, annoyed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I don't think you see me anymore. He laughed. Actually laughed. Liora, stop being dramatic. You're overthinking everything again. That word. The one he always used to dismiss me. Something in me snapped completely. I'm not dramatic, I said quietly. I'm done, he frowned. Done with what? With this, with you. With being invisible in my own home, he scoffed, standing up. You're not going anywhere. You'd fall apart without me? I met his gaze for the first time in years and smiled. We'll see about that. He stared at me, half in disbelief, half in amusement, like a man who'd never imagined his furniture could talk back. Then he walked away, muttering, You'll calm down by morning. But he was wrong, because by morning, I wouldn't be the same woman he thought he owned. By morning, I would start remembering who I was before him, and that would be the beginning of his downfall. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The city was still half asleep, a soft hum of distant taxis and the faint buzz of a streetlight outside our window. Jack was still snoring lightly beside me, the same way he always did after drinking too much whiskey. His arm was sprawled across my side of the bed, heavy and careless, as if he owned every inch of space, even in his sleep. I carefully lifted it and slid out from under him. The floor was cold under my feet. I walked into the kitchen, sat at the counter, and stared at my hands. They were shaking. I'd told him I was done, but saying it and being done were two very different things. For years, Jack had built a cage around me, not with bars, but with words that sounded like care and rules that sounded like reason. Don't go out too late, he'd say. Your friends don't really get you like I do. Why waste time painting when you could take that bookkeeping course? It's more practical. Each comment seemed harmless on its own, even thoughtful. But piece by piece, he built walls around my freedom until I couldn't even see the sky anymore. When we first got married, I told him I wanted to start a small online art shop, sell custom portraits, maybe teach classes. He'd smiled, pulled me close, and said, That's adorable, Liora. But let's be realistic, okay? You don't need to stress about money. Just focus on the house, on me. I'll handle the rest. At the time, it sounded like love, like protection. But over the years, it started to feel like possession. He managed every dollar, every bill, every account. He even convinced me to merge our bank cards. For simplicity, he said. What it really meant was control. That morning, I opened my laptop to check my email, and there it was. A new message from my old college friend, Ava. Hey, it's been forever. Saw one of your old sketches on my feed. You were so talented, Liora. Do you still paint? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Not anymore. Then I deleted the message. But I didn't delete the ache that came with it. I missed that version of me. The one who laughed too loudly, who got paint on her fingers and didn't care. The one who used to believe she could create something beautiful out of chaos. Jack didn't kill that part of me all at once. He did it gently, methodically, until I forgot I'd ever been more than what he allowed me to be. When he finally woke up that morning, it was as if nothing had happened the night before. "Morning," he said casually, buttoning his shirt. "Coffee?" "I already made it," I said. "Perfect." He sipped and smiled faintly. "You were moody last night. You okay now?" That word again, and moody, it was his favorite weapon. Anytime I spoke up, anytime I disagreed, he'd tilt his head and call me emotional, irrational, dramatic. It was easier for him to label my feelings than to face his actions. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." He nodded approvingly, kissed my forehead, and left for work. As soon as the door closed, I dropped the act. My hands gripped the counter, knuckles white. I could still feel his condescension in the air like cigarette smoke. It lingered, even after he was gone. That day, I did something small but monumental. I took out my old art supplies from the closet. The sketchbooks he hadn't thrown away were still covered in dust, but they were mine. I sat down at the kitchen table, pencil trembling in my hand, and began to draw. At first, it was just lines. Hesitant, broken. Then a shape. Then a face, my own, tired eyes. Faded smile. But beneath that, a flicker of strength. When I finished, I looked at it and whispered, "You're still here." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. The sound of the door startled me. Jack was home early. "Hey," he said, tossing his briefcase onto the couch. "What's all this?" I froze, trying to cover the sketch. "Nothing, I was just, are you drawing again?" He frowned, picking up one of the pencils. "Didn't we talk about this?" I clenched my jaw. "No, you talked about it." He sighed, like a parent indulging a child. "Liora, I'm not trying to control you. I just think you should focus on something that matters." "This matters to me," I said quietly. He smirked. "You're not a teenager anymore, babe. Grow up." He left the pencil rolling on the counter and walked away. I stared after him, my heart pounding, anger boiling beneath my skin. For years, I had accepted his words as truth. But that night, they hit differently. For the first time, I saw what he was really doing, diminishing me so I'd never rise high enough to see who he truly was. The next few weeks became a blur of tension. I tried to reclaim little parts of myself, quietly. I painted when he wasn't home. I reconnected with Ava, secretly. I started reading books again, the ones that used to fill me with fire. And every time Jack sensed that spark returning, he tried to snuff it out. "Why are you smiling at your phone? Who are you texting? Why do you look so happy all of a sudden?" It was exhausting, constantly shrinking to fit the space he allowed me. But little by little, I learned something powerful. Even the smallest acts of defiance are seeds. And once planted, they grow. One night, I overheard him on the phone in the living room. His voice was soft, playful, a tone I hadn't heard in years. "Of course I miss you," he whispered. "You know how hard it is with her always around." My chest tightened. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart thundering. There it was, the confirmation I didn't want, but already knew. When he hung up, I walked back to our bedroom, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. No tears. No screaming, just a numb, eerie calm. He had built this prison brick by brick, and now I knew exactly how to dismantle it. The next morning, I smiled at him over breakfast for the first time in months. "You seem better," he said, raising an eyebrow. "I am," I replied, sliding a plate toward him. "I've decided you were right all along," he smirked. "About what?" "About being realistic. I think it's time I grow up." He looked pleased, smug even. But what he didn't know was that my words weren't surrender. They were strategy, because now I understood something crucial. To beat a man like Jack, you have to let him believe he's still winning. That day, I decided I wouldn't just leave him. I'd make sure when I walked away, he'd be standing in the ruins of everything he'd built on my back. It's strange how breaking points never announce themselves. They don't come with thunder or warning. They creep in quietly, disguised as ordinary moments. A conversation, a glance, a sound you've heard 1,000 times before. For me, it came on a Wednesday night. Jack had just gotten home late again. I could tell by the smell of perfume clinging to his shirt that he hadn't been at work. "Traffic," he said, loosening his tie, avoiding my eyes. "Brutal tonight." "Traffic that smells like Chanel?" I asked softly. He froze for a second, the faintest flicker of panic, before covering it with a smirk. "You're imagining things again, Liora?" That sentence, "you're imagining things again," had been his weapon for years. A simple string of words that made me question my own reality. But not this time. I watched him walk into the bedroom, humming like nothing was wrong. He didn't even bother changing his story. That arrogance, that smug certainty that I'd just swallow the lie again, was the spark that lit everything inside me on fire. The next morning, he left early. I waited 5 minutes after the door shut before I moved. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, grabbed my bag, and took the subway to his office building on Madison Avenue. I knew his routine. He always stopped for coffee before heading up. So I waited across the street, hiding behind a crowd of commuters. 10 minutes later, I saw him, and he wasn't alone. She was tall, blonde, wearing a tight navy dress and the same perfume I'd smelled the night before. They were laughing, their hands brushing, his smile the kind I hadn't seen directed at me in years. When she leaned in to kiss his cheek, I felt the world tilt. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. The realization that while I was at home folding his shirts and cooking his meals, he was living a second life that didn't include me. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I just turned around, walked into a small cafe down the block, and ordered black coffee. My hands were shaking so badly I almost spilled it. The barista looked concerned. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yeah," I whispered. "I'm just done pretending." That night, I didn't say a word when Jack came home. I cooked dinner, set the table, smiled like everything was normal. He noticed. "You're quiet." "Just tired," I said. "Long day." He nodded, too distracted to care. When he went to shower, I picked up his phone from the counter. He never locked it. Another display of arrogance. I opened his messages, and there it was. Her name was Melissa Hart, saved under Client M. Their conversation was months long. Dinner reservations, hotel bookings, photos of them together. He'd even texted her during our anniversary dinner. "Wish I were with you instead. She's talking about her paintings again, LOL." My chest tightened. That was the night I had tried to share my dream with him again, to start teaching art online. He dismissed it, said it wasn't serious work, and he had texted her about it. That was my breaking point. Not the cheating, not the lies, but the realization that he mocked the pieces of me I loved most. When he came out of the shower, I was standing by the window, phone in my hand. "Hey," he said, rubbing a towel through his hair. "What's wrong?" I turned to him slowly. "Who's Melissa Hart?" He froze. Then came the act, the same one I'd seen 100 times. The sigh, the eye roll, the fake laugh. "Liora, are you serious? She's a client." "She's not," I said. My voice was steady. Too steady. "You texted her that you wished you were with her. You booked hotels with her. You lied to me for months." He stepped forward, voice rising. "You had no right to go through my phone." "I had every right," I said sharply. "It's my life too." He pointed a finger at me. "You're insane. You've been paranoid since the day we met." That word, insane, cracked something deep inside me. I laughed. It startled him. "Do you know what's insane, Jack? Spending years believing that if I just loved you harder, you'd finally see me. That's insane," he sneered. "Oh, come on. You think you're some kind of victim? You've had it easy. I pay for everything. You sit at home all day. You should be grateful." Grateful. That word echoed through my chest like a slap. "Grateful," I whispered. "You took everything from me. My confidence, my friends, my dreams. You built a world where I couldn't breathe without your permission." He scoffed. "You always exaggerate. You want drama, Liora? Fine. Maybe we should take a break." He said it like he was doing me a favor. "Take a break?" I repeated quietly. "No, Jack. I think you should take a long, hard look at your life, because one day, you're going to wake up and realize I'm gone. And when that happens, you'll finally understand what it's like to lose something you thought you owned." He smirked, shaking his head. "You won't leave. You don't have the guts." I met his eyes and smiled. We'll see. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the rain tapping against the window. My mind was quiet for the first time in years, because now I knew what I had to do. Leaving him wouldn't be enough. He had taken too much for too long. My art, my identity, my sense of worth. He needed to feel that loss, to watch the empire he'd built on my silence crumble piece by piece. And I would be the one to make that happen. The next morning, I woke up before him, packed a small bag, and left a note on the nightstand. It said only 2 words: "Watch me." Then I walked out. The elevator ride down felt like freedom. The city was alive outside, neon and noise, a reminder that there was still a world waiting beyond him. As I stepped into the street, I realized something. He had underestimated the wrong woman, because I wasn't broken anymore. I was becoming dangerous. That was the moment I stopped being Jack's victim and started becoming his karma. Freedom didn't feel the way I expected it to. It wasn't fireworks or tears of relief. It was silence. A heavy, aching kind of silence that echoed through the walls of the tiny apartment I rented 2 blocks from my old life. I had left Jack 2 weeks earlier, walking out with nothing but a small suitcase, a few sketchbooks, and a heart that still hadn't learned how to beat without fear. I thought I'd feel powerful. But instead, I felt like a ghost, haunting my own choices. The first morning alone, I woke up to the sound of the city. Horns, footsteps, sirens. A kind of chaos that didn't care who you were. I made coffee, sat by the window, and stared at the skyline. I'd spent years looking at those same buildings through the glass walls of Jack's apartment, wondering what freedom might taste like. Now I knew. It tasted bitter and sweet, like burnt coffee and new beginnings. I found a job at a small art supply store downtown, minimum wage, long hours but surrounded by the smell of paint and paper. The owner, a kind old man named Harold, didn't ask about my past. He just handed me a name tag and said, "You'll fit in fine here, kid." It was the first time anyone had said something kind to me without an agenda. Every day after work, I'd walk home past the park, watching street artists paint murals under bridges and tourists snapping photos. I'd stop sometimes just to breathe it in. The life, the color, the mess. It reminded me I was still human. But the nights were harder. Loneliness is strange. It doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in like cold air through cracks in the window. There were nights I almost called him. Not because I missed him, but because I missed the noise. The routine. Even the arguments. That's what abuse does. It tricks your brain into craving the very thing that hurt you. One night, after a long shift, I came home to find a single envelope slid under my door. No return address. Just my name, Liora. I knew that handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "You've made your point. Come home, we can fix this. Stop embarrassing yourself. No apology. No remorse. Just control disguised as concern." I laughed bitterly, crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Then I sat on the floor, shaking. Even from a distance, he was still trying to dictate my life. I realized then, leaving him wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next day at the shop, Harold found me sketching behind the counter. "That's good," he said, peering over my shoulder. "You've got a steady hand." I smiled faintly. "Used to be better," he chuckled. "Used to be is still better than never was." That small encouragement lit something inside me. That night, I pulled out my old supplies and started painting again. Small pieces at first, just for me. Faces, memories, emotions I couldn't say out loud. And for the first time in years, I didn't hear Jack's voice criticizing me, just my own, Quiet, gentle, real. A few weeks later, Ava called. Liora? It's been forever. I heard what happened. Are you okay? I hesitated. I don't know, but I'm better than I was. She laughed softly. That's a start. Listen, I'm organizing a local art showcase next month. Small event, nothing fancy. You should submit something. My heart skipped. I don't think I'm ready for that. Then it's perfect, she said. Do it scared. Those words stuck with me. Do it scared. So I did. I submitted one of my new paintings, a self-portrait titled Reclaimed. It showed a woman standing in front of a shattered mirror, her reflection splintered but her eyes steady. It wasn't just a painting. It was a confession. The night of the showcase, I almost didn't go. My hands were clammy, my stomach in knots. But when I stepped into the small gallery, lights dim, soft jazz playing, something inside me shifted. People stopped to look at my piece. They whispered. They smiled. One woman touched my arm and said, "This painting feels like freedom." I could have cried. After years of being told my art was worthless, someone finally saw it, saw me. Then, just as I began to breathe again, I heard his voice. "Liora?" I froze. I turned slowly. Jack was standing near the doorway, wearing that same expensive suit, arrogance wrapped around him like a second skin. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I came to see you," he said smoothly. "Ava told me about this event. You didn't think I'd miss it, did you?" My pulse quickened. "You have no right to be here," he smiled. "Relax, I'm just here to support you. You look different." "Good," I said sharply. "That means it's working." He chuckled, leaning closer. "You think this little art hobby makes you independent? Come on, Liora. You're not built for this life. You belong with me." I met his eyes, steady. I used to believe that. But I finally realized belonging doesn't mean being owned. For the first time, he didn't have a response. He just stared at me, confused, as if the script he'd written for me had suddenly vanished. Then he smirked, that cruel twist of lips I knew too well. "You'll come back. They always do." "Not this time," I said quietly. "Not ever." He left before the event ended, but the encounter left me shaking. When I got home, I sat on the floor of my small apartment, staring at my painting's photo on my phone. I thought about how far I'd come, from the woman who used to flinch at every raised voice to the one who stood her ground under gallery lights. But I also knew something now. Jack wouldn't stop. Men like him never did. If I wanted true peace, I'd have to take it, deliberately, permanently. That night, I opened my laptop and started researching legal forums, financial advice pages, support groups for women who'd escaped controlling relationships. And somewhere between those tabs, a plan began to form, one that would hit him where it hurt most. His career, his reputation, his money. Because Jack had always believed I was too soft to fight back. He had no idea I was learning how to strike quietly, strategically, the way he had done to me for years. Only this time, the silence would be his. The moment I decided to take my power back wasn't dramatic. It began with a small, ordinary action. A credit card application filled out on my tiny kitchen table while the city hummed outside my window. I stared at the form for a long time, my pencil hovering. It was ridiculous in a way, a piece of plastic. But when your life has been managed by someone else for years, even a simple bank card feels like rebellion. I signed my name with a steady hand. Then I made another call, a different kind of phone call. I dialed a legal aid number I'd found on a support site and listened as a kind woman named Rosa explained the basics: how to separate finances, how to document infidelity, how to protect my work. She used plain words, the kind that felt like a rope thrown to someone drowning. "You don't have to do everything at once," Rosa said, "but start. Even tiny steps add up." I wrote notes. I wanted to scream and cry and laugh all at once. Instead, I breathed, and for the first time in months, I felt a crack of clarity. The first concrete thing I did was open a bank account in my name only. I walked into a branch, heart pounding, and the teller introduced herself like she had no idea how dangerous that little act could be. "Welcome," she said. "How would you like to set this up?" Just a checking account, I said. No joint access. She smiled, stamped forms, asked me for ID, and slid a debit card across the counter. I tucked it into my wallet like a talisman. It felt small and huge at the same time. Then I set up an email account I knew he didn't have access to. I changed passwords for anything he might reach. The feeling of locking those digital doors was electric. I'd been transparent in his world for too long. Now I had a space that was mine. That night, I met with Ava at a cafe and told her everything. The lights and the keys, the lies and the nights I'd spent pretending. She listened, eyes wide but steady. "You're doing it," she said finally. "You sound like someone who knows what she wants." "I don't know exactly what I want yet," I admitted. "I just know I'm tired of being walked over." "Good," she said, "because you don't have to go it alone." She connected me to a support group of women who had left controlling relationships. I went to the first meeting skeptical, arms folded, expecting pity. Instead, I found fierce, soft people who traded resources and advice like survival maps. A woman named Priya showed me how she kept records of phone messages. A man named Thomas, a retired accountant, offered to help me separate expenses. It felt like building a team. Not a family that judged me, but a team that wanted me to live. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. With Rose's legal tips and Thomas's spreadsheet help, I began documenting everything. I saved texts, backed up emails, printed bank statements. I made copies of my artwork files and kept originals in a storage unit with a lock I chose myself. I typed timelines, dates, times, words, the small betrayals that added up. It felt clinical, almost surgical. Maybe that's what survival needs. A plan so methodical it leaves no room for the gaslighting that used to drown me. Then I did the hardest thing of all. I reclaimed my name as an artist. I reopened an old portfolio site, uploaded work I'd hidden for years, and wrote a short bio that didn't apologize. No, just an amateur, or if anyone cares. I wrote simply, I make art about love, loss, and the stubbornness of hope. The first comment came within an hour. Stunning work, then an email from a small gallery, asking if I'd consider showing pieces. My chest swelled like the first warm air after a storm. Jack texted that evening. "Where are you?" it read. "You forgot your keys. Can you come home?" I stared at the message, felt my pulse slow. The old me would have dropped everything. The new me typed back, "I'm fine. Don't contact my work email again." Then I turned my phone face down. That night I painted until my hands cramped. The brush moved like memory, quick, then steady, carving light into shadow. I painted a woman at a window, hands on the sill, looking out at a city that had no idea she belonged to it now. When I finished, I stepped back and felt, not triumph, exactly, but a fierce, quiet rightness. The next morning, I began the financial work. I listed things in our apartment that were mine. The easel, the camera, certain paintings. I noted dates and proof of purchase. Thomas helped me draft a simple ledger showing which funds had come from me over the years. He taught me how to separate expenses and document his control of accounts. Every line I wrote felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. He had assumed I couldn't do this without him. He had been wrong again. I also took a safer step. I changed all delivery addresses for my art-related invoices to a P.O. box I rented. Little things, boxes arriving to a different door, calls routed to my new email, built a web of independence. My confidence built like muscle. I pushed, lightly at first. A sales inquiry answered. An art fair accepted. Then more boldly, I negotiated my own commission and didn't apologize when I asked for fair pay. When a client lowballed me, I politely refused. It was small victories, but they felt enormous. At night, Melissa still called Jack. I tracked her on social media like a detective, copying evidence of dinners and trips into a folder labeled Evidence. I wasn't doing it for revenge anymore. I was doing it for clarity, to separate what was true from the stories he liked to tell. One evening, as I compiled messages into neat folders, I smiled at how far I'd come. The woman who once accepted his explanations without question was gone. In her place stood someone who kept records, who built safety nets, who refused to let a life be stolen by another person's arrogance. Not everyone cheered me on. Some friends worried I was moving too fast. Ava thought I should be cautious about how openly I documented things. Keep it tight, she warned. You don't want to give him ammunition. She was right. I kept the records secure, shared them only with Rosa and Thomas in the support group. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about survival. But there was a new feeling that surprised me. Joy. I felt it bubble up in the smallest moments. When a gallery emailed, when a stranger complimented my work, when I paid a bill from my own account and didn't flinch. Power, I learned, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums, constant and certain, like a line of light cutting through a dark room. By the time a lawyer called back and scheduled a consultation, I felt ready. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I could. I had paperwork, witnesses, savings. I had a name again. And the world, the one outside Jack's control, was beginning to notice her. The moment I took my power back wasn't one big act. It was 1,000 small, steady choices that added up until leaving felt like survival, and survival felt like strategy. I closed my laptop that night and whispered to myself, "This is mine." And for the first time in years, the word belonged to me. People think revenge is a single moment, one dramatic act that erases all the pain. But it isn't. It's a symphony, a slow, deliberate build toward the final note. Mine began the morning I walked back into Jack's world, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his undoing. By then, everything was in place. The lawyer Rosa had connected me with, Marla, was sharp and fearless. We had spent weeks building a case, hidden accounts, falsified expense reports, evidence of infidelity. Jack had blurred the lines between his firm's money and personal indulgence, using business credit for luxury dinners and client trips that were really romantic getaways with Melissa. He'd left a trail, arrogant as ever, and now that arrogance would be the weapon that destroyed him. The first step was quiet. Marla advised me to stay calm, polite and unshakable when we served the papers. "Don't gloat," she warned. "He'll do that for you." In panic, I nodded. I want him to realize it's already over. And so, one rainy Tuesday morning, I did exactly that. I walked into his office unannounced, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a sealed envelope. His secretary, startled, stammered, Ms. Jameson, it's fine," I said with a calm smile. "He'll want to see me." When I stepped into his office, he was on the phone, pacing, loud and confident as ever. He froze when he saw me. "Liora?" I placed the envelope neatly on his desk. "You've been served." His expression flickered from confusion to disbelief to fury. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," I said evenly. "And financial audits. You'll want to read them carefully." He scoffed. "You're joking." "No, Jack, you are. Or at least you were, every time you thought I wasn't watching." He tore open the envelope, scanning the pages. "You can't prove any of this." I tilted my head. "You sure about that? You used your company's funds for personal expenses. I have statements, dates, screenshots. It's all there. Your partners will see it by noon." His color drained. "You wouldn't." "Oh, but I already did," I said quietly. "I told you once I was done being invisible. You should have believed me." For a long moment, he just stared, speechless, shaking, cornered. Finally, he threw the papers onto the desk. "You're doing this out of spite." "No," I said softly. "I'm doing this out of self-respect." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Jack?" He looked up, jaw clenched. "Melissa might want to find a new job. Her name's all over those receipts." The silence that followed was delicious. I walked out without looking back. The sound of his voice calling my name, panicked, desperate, echoed down the hall like an old ghost, finally realizing it no longer mattered. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. That night, I stood in my small apartment by the window, watching the city lights pulse. For years, those lights had felt like a world I couldn't reach, Now they felt like applause. But revenge is never just about the strike. It's about endurance, about staying composed while the chaos you caused begins to bloom. The next morning, Marla called. "It started," she said. "What started?" His partners confronted him. They're furious. One of them leaked the audit. I felt my breath catch. Already? Already. You've built a perfect domino setup, Liora. Just keep your distance. Let gravity do the rest. I smiled. That's the plan. Over the next few days, the unraveling was fast and ruthless. Jack's firm launched an internal investigation. Clients began asking questions. The story spread quietly through industry whispers. Financial misconduct, ethical breaches, possible suspension. Every night, I painted. The pieces that emerged were darker now. Gold streaks over deep gray, stormlight breaking through shadows. People started buying them faster than I could list them. A magazine even reached out, asking for an interview. I said no. Not yet. The story wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, Jack showed up at my apartment. It was late, and the knock startled me. I opened the door, and there he was, hair disheveled, tie loose, eyes sunken. He looked nothing like the man who once told me I'd fall apart without him. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped inside, glancing around the small space. "So this is where you live now?" I folded my arms. "Yes, it's mine." He laughed bitterly. "You really think this is winning? You ruined everything. My job, my reputation." "No, Jack. You did that." He looked at me, fury flashing behind his exhaustion. "I loved you, Liora. I gave you everything." I shook my head. "You gave me nothing but conditions." He flinched like the truth itself burned. "I can fix this," he said. "Drop the case. I'll make it right. We can start over." I studied him for a moment. This broken man clinging to the illusion of power. Then I said quietly, "You taught me something, Jack." He frowned. "What?" "How easy it is to mistake control for love. I used to think if I could just be perfect, you'd finally see me. But the truth is you only saw what you could use." His eyes filled with something. Anger, grief, I couldn't tell. "Goodbye, Jack," I said, opening the door. He didn't move. "You'll regret this." I met his gaze, calm and certain. I already did. For years, he left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. I didn't flinch. That night, I sat on the floor with a glass of wine and the city humming beyond my window. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The next morning, headlines hit the local business section. Prominent lawyer suspended amid financial misconduct investigation. His firm had cut ties with him. Melissa, too, had resigned. The empire he built on ego was crumbling, quietly, publicly, permanently. I clipped the article and tucked it into my journal, not out of spite, but as a reminder, sometimes justice doesn't come from screaming. It comes from strategy. When Ava called that afternoon, her voice was trembling. "Liora, did you see the news?" I did. She laughed through disbelief. "You did it." "You actually did it," I smiled faintly. "I didn't destroy him, Ava. I just stopped letting him destroy me." That evening, I finished my latest painting. It was called The Strike. A single figure stood in the center. No face, no features. Just a silhouette surrounded by falling glass. Not chaos, not ruin, but clarity. I signed it with my full name, Liora Jameson, not Mrs. Jack Jameson. Just me. And for the first time, that was more than enough. The morning the world found out who Jack Jameson really was, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. Messages, notifications, missed calls, a storm of attention I hadn't asked for but somehow knew was coming. Ava's text was the first I opened. "Liora, it's everywhere. He's done." My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the news. Multiple outlets had picked up the story. Former Manhattan attorney under investigation for fraud and misuse of client funds. There were photos of him, leaving his office, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow, avoiding cameras. The once arrogant man who used to hold his chin high now looked like he was walking through rain with no umbrella. It should have felt like triumph. But what I felt was something quieter. A deep, settling calm, like the last echo of thunder after a storm finally fades. I sat on my small couch, watching the sunlight creep across the floor, thinking about how strange justice feels when it's finally yours. For years, Jack had been the one holding the microphone, controlling the narrative, making me the hysterical wife in every story he told his friends. Now, the truth was speaking for itself, and for once, it didn't need my voice to sound believable. Around noon, Ava called. "You're going to want to see this," she said. "Channel 5, right now." I turned on the TV. There he was, Jack, standing outside the courthouse, microphones shoved in his face. Reporters were asking questions faster than he could think. "Mr. Jameson, do you deny the allegations? Was this money used for personal vacations? Is it true your ex-wife provided the documentation?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, his gaze flicked toward the camera, almost as if he knew I was watching. He muttered something about false accusations and disgruntled individuals, but his voice was small, defensive. I couldn't help but smile. For years he had silenced me. Now the world wouldn't stop listening to him, and every word made him smaller. Later that day, my lawyer Marla called. "They've issued a temporary suspension pending a full audit. The evidence was airtight. You did good, Liora." "Thank you," I said softly. "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You're the one who stood up. I just helped hold the door open." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended, because she was right. I had done this. I had walked through every sleepless night, every moment of self-doubt, every echo of his voice telling me I'd fall apart without him. And now, he was the one unraveling. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. That evening, I went to the gallery where my paintings were on display. It was a small event. Local artists, dim lighting, glasses of red wine, and quiet music. But for me, it felt monumental. My newest piece, The Strike, hung front and center. People gathered around it, whispering. I overheard snippets. Raw emotion, pain, and power must be based on something real. A woman approached me, middle-aged with kind eyes. "You're Liora, right?" "The artist?" I nodded. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "There's something about your work." "It feels like survival," I smiled. "That's exactly what it is." An hour later, Ava arrived with 2 coffees and a grin. "You're trending online," she said, half joking. "People are connecting the dots. They know you're the Liora Jameson." My stomach twisted. "That's not what I wanted." "I know," she said gently. "But you deserve credit for what you endured, and for how you turned it into art." I shook my head. "It's not about credit. It's about closure," Ava nodded. "Then take it. You earned every bit of it. Still, curiosity got the better of me that night. I went home, opened my laptop, and typed my name into the search bar. There it was. My art page, interviews, reviews, all mixed in with news articles about Jack. Some framed me as the ex-wife who exposed him, others as the artist who turned trauma into triumph. One headline stood out: "From Silence to Spotlight, How Liora Jameson Found Her Voice." I stared at it for a long time. It didn't make me angry or proud, just reflective, because finding my voice wasn't about revenge or fame. It was about remembering who I'd been before someone convinced me to whisper. 2 days later, Jack called. The name flashing across my screen made my stomach drop, but I answered anyway. I needed to hear it, the sound of defeat. "Liora," he said, his voice rough. "You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy." "No," I said quietly. "I got what I deserved. There's a difference." He exhaled sharply. "You think you're better than me now? You think people will forget what you did? What I did?" I repeated, incredulous. "Jack, I didn't destroy your career. You did. I just stopped hiding your mess." He was silent for a long moment. Then he muttered, "You'll never be free of me." I smiled. "That's where you're wrong. You don't live in my head anymore." And then I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline, the exhaustion, the flood of emotions, it all swirled together. I walked to my balcony, the city lights flickering beneath me like stars that had fallen too close. For so long, I'd wanted revenge to feel like fireworks, loud and bright and unmistakable. But standing there, breathing in the cool air, I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't noise, it was peace. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that no one controlled my story anymore. A week later, the gallery owner called me with an offer, my own solo exhibition. "We want to feature your work under one theme," she said. "Resilience. It feels like you've lived it." I smiled softly. "Yes, I have." The night of the show, I stood in the center of the room surrounded by my art. Each piece a chapter of my journey. The fear, the silence, the awakening, the strike. People mingled, whispered, admired. But I wasn't nervous. I wasn't small. I was seen. Toward the end of the evening, a young woman approached me, maybe 21, with tear-streaked cheeks. "Your story," she said quietly. It gave me courage. "I'm leaving someone who makes me feel small." My chest tightened. "Then that's the best revenge there is," she smiled, nodding. "Thank you." As she walked away, I realized something profound. My pain had built a bridge for someone else's freedom, and that, more than anything, was worth every scar. When I got home that night, I looked at myself in the mirror, not as the woman Jack broke, but as the one he accidentally built, stronger, sharper, untouchable. Tomorrow, people would still talk about him, but tonight, I painted my final masterpiece, not of him, but of me. A woman standing in front of an open door, light flooding in, her face unafraid. I titled it simply, Public Reckoning, because sometimes the loudest justice is living beautifully where someone once tried to bury you. The weeks after the exhibition felt surreal. For the first time in years, I woke up without dread pressing against my chest, no phone vibrating with commands, no footsteps pacing down the hallway. Just quiet, and the soft hum of a world that didn't revolve around anyone but me. Freedom, I learned, wasn't loud. It was subtle. It lived in small things, leaving a painting unfinished because I could, eating breakfast at noon, taking long walks without checking the time. But freedom also carried a strange kind of loneliness. After years of being defined by someone else's shadow, standing in your own light can feel blinding. The news cycle eventually moved on from Jack's downfall. His firm replaced him, the story faded, and new scandals took his place. I didn't follow his updates, but sometimes late at night, his name would still appear online, a stray headline, a comment thread. I'd scroll past it quickly, my stomach tightening, like muscle memory refusing to relax. Healing, I realized, wasn't linear. Some days I felt invincible. Other days, I felt hollow. Ava noticed it first. "You're quieter lately," she said one afternoon as we walked through Central Park. The leaves were turning gold, drifting lazily through the air. "I'm thinking a lot," I admitted. "About who I am without the fight," she smiled. "You're allowed to rest, Liora. You don't always have to be in battle mode." I sighed. "I don't even know what peace feels like anymore." "Then you'll learn," she said softly. "The same way you learn to survive, one day at a time." That night, I stood by the window, watching the city breathe beneath me. The skyline glowed like an open wound stitched with light. I thought about all the years I'd spent in Jack's apartment, staring at this same view, wondering if life would ever change. Now it had. And yet the silence still felt too big sometimes. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since before my marriage. The first page was shaky, unsure, like learning how to speak a forgotten language. "I'm free, but I'm still scared," I wrote. "Scared that without anger, I'll lose my fire." But the more I wrote, the more I realized my fire had never come from rage. It came from resilience, from refusing to stay small, even when the world told me to. A few days later, I received an email from a university art department. They'd seen my work at the gallery and wanted me to speak at a seminar for young artists. Topic: Art as Reclamation, the message read. My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't polished or rehearsed. But Ava convinced me otherwise. "You've lived what they're trying to learn," she said. "That's worth more than any textbook." So I said yes. The day of the seminar, I stood backstage, palms sweaty, heart racing. Rows of students filled the auditorium, sketchbooks in their laps, eyes full of curiosity. When they introduced me, the applause felt surreal, like it was meant for someone else. I walked up to the podium, took a breath, and said, "I'm not here to talk about success. I'm here to talk about survival." The room fell silent. I told them my story, not every detail, but enough. How I'd lost my voice in someone else's idea of love, how art became my way out, how pain turned into paint and silence into color. And when I finished, I looked out at the sea of faces and said, "You don't have to suffer to create. But if you do suffer, make it mean something. Don't let it end with the pain." They stood and clapped. Some cried. One girl came up afterward and said, "Your words made me want to live." That sentence broke something open in me, in the best way, because maybe healing isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about using what broke you to build something stronger. After the seminar, I started teaching part-time, small workshops, nothing formal. I loved it. Watching others find their voices through art reminded me that revenge wasn't my whole story. It was just the doorway to everything that came after. The bitterness that once fueled me began to dissolve. In its place grew gratitude, not for what happened, but for what I became because of it. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. One evening, months later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. My first instinct was to throw it away, but the handwriting stopped me. It was Jack's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Liora, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I lost everything. My job, my home, my pride. But what hurts most isn't losing those things. It's realizing I never deserved you. E." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not to hold on, but to close the chapter completely. Forgiveness didn't come in that moment, but understanding did. Jack had been a part of my story, yes, but no longer its author. That night, I walked through the city alone. It was raining, soft and steady, the kind that blurs reflections into watercolor. I passed by a small bookstore and stopped when I saw something in the window, a print of one of my paintings. The Strike. I stepped inside, smiling at the familiarity. The owner recognized me instantly. "You're Liora Jameson, right? The artist?" I nodded. He grinned. "That piece inspires people. You should see how many stand there staring at it." I laughed softly. It used to remind me of pain. Now it just reminds me that I survived. When I got home, I lit a candle and opened my journal again. I thought revenge would heal me, I wrote, but healing came when I stopped needing to win. I closed the book, exhaled, and looked around my apartment, the one I built, the one filled with art, laughter, and my own quiet rules. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I just felt alive. And somewhere, deep down, I realized that the woman who once begged for love had grown into someone who didn't need permission to exist. That was the real victory. People think closure comes like a grand finale. A door slamming, a light switch flicked off, an ending you can point to. But real closure isn't an ending. It's a quiet beginning, a moment when you finally stop waiting for someone else to hand you peace. It had been almost a year since Jack's fall from grace. In that time, I had rebuilt everything he once tore apart. My career, my confidence, my sense of self. But most importantly, my capacity for joy. And joy, I learned, is the ultimate revenge. My art had taken on a new tone. The colors were lighter now, softer. I used to paint rage into every stroke. Now I painted sunlight. The shadows were still there, but they didn't dominate anymore. They framed the light instead. I'd opened my own studio in Brooklyn, a small place with brick walls and tall windows that let the morning pour in. Every corner smelled of oil paint, coffee, and the faint hum of hope. Students came and went, artists gathered, stories were shared. The walls that once echoed Jack's cruelty now echoed laughter. I called it Studio Phoenix, because that's what I had done. Burned, and then risen. One afternoon, a reporter from a women's magazine came by for an interview. She had kind eyes and a notebook full of questions. "Liora," she said, "your story has inspired so many. Do you ever think about what you'd say to your younger self, the woman who was still living in his shadow?" I smiled, looking around at the life I'd built from ashes. "I'd tell her that survival isn't about being unbreakable," I said softly. "It's about learning that even broken things can be beautiful again." She scribbled something down and asked one final question. "And what about him, your ex-husband? If he were watching this right now, what would you say to him?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "Nothing," I said, "because silence is the only language he ever taught me. And now, I've mastered it." After the interview, I closed the studio early and walked down to the waterfront. The wind off the East River was sharp, but it felt good. Cleansing. I leaned against the railing, watching the city shimmer in the fading light. For years, I'd watched this skyline through glass, trapped inside his apartment, thinking freedom meant escape. But standing there now, I realized freedom isn't running away. It's choosing to stay, knowing you're finally safe inside your own skin. The sun dipped below the skyline, streaking the water in gold. I whispered into the breeze, "I forgive you, Liora." It wasn't for him. It was for me. A few weeks later, I received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "Thank you." The message was from a woman named Claire, a stranger. "I saw your talk online. I was in a relationship like yours for 10 years. I left last month. You helped me believe I could." I sat there, staring at those words, tears blurring the screen. That's when it hit me. My revenge story had become someone else's survival guide. All the pain, the years of silence, the humiliation. It hadn't been wasted. It had transformed into something far bigger than me. And that realization, that was true healing. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal? Share your story in the comments, and subscribe if you believe no one should be treated this way. One evening, I found myself sorting through old boxes, remnants of my past life I hadn't touched since leaving Jack. Inside one, buried beneath old clothes and forgotten memories, I found the letter he'd written, the one where he said he didn't deserve me. I read it once more, not with anger, but with distance. His words no longer had power. They were just echoes from a house I'd already burned down. I folded the paper carefully, walked outside to the small balcony overlooking the city, and lit it with a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges, eating away at the apology until it became nothing but smoke. As it drifted into the night, I whispered, "You don't get to live here anymore." Later, I painted one last piece, not for sale, not for display, just for me. It showed a woman standing on a bridge at dawn, the city behind her, the world before her. She wasn't looking back. I called it closure. When it dried, I hung it in my living room. Every morning since, I've made coffee, sat in front of it, and reminded myself, I am not what happened to me. I am what I chose to become after. Months later, Studio Phoenix celebrated its 1-year anniversary. Friends, students, artists, people who had become my found family, gathered to toast the milestone. The place buzzed with life and warmth. Ava raised her glass and said, "To Liora, proof that you can lose everything and still come out shining." Everyone clinked glasses, laughter filling the room. I smiled, looking around, not with pride, but with gratitude. When the noise softened, I whispered under my breath, to the woman I thought I'd never find again. And for the first time, I didn't just survive my past. I outgrew it. Peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of self. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too deserve respect and unconditional love. Because sometimes, the real revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's rebuilding yourself so completely that they can never touch your peace again.